Anthony Richardson took all the first team snaps yet again. What does this mean for the Colts? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Zach Hicks, your film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com, and joining me today is Horseshoe Huddle's boots on the ground and a guy who I could not come up with a funny alliteration to name him today. So Jake Arthur, who has been at Colts camp throughout the entire course of this whole offseason here. Again, we're going to do our daily update that we give you guys. We're going to talk about the Colts offense in training camp, talk about the Colts defense, and then open the floor to all of your guys' questions at the very end. So if you guys are joining us here on YouTube right now, throw in some questions, some things you want us to talk about in that final segment. If not, then yeah, we do have a couple things that we can talk about and really go back into. But starting off, before we go into the offense, talk about some news and notes, because we did miss yesterday because there was no practice, so we didn't record yesterday. So the things that happened yesterday that we missed are the Colts signed wide receiver Amari Rodgers, or I guess they claimed him technically, which is actually something I wanted to talk about here. The Colts are going to have the 4th spot in the waiver wire until week 3 this season. So the one benefit of being really bad one season is you have really high waiver priority. And they were able to grab someone like Amari Rodgers, a former 3rd-round pick of the Green Bay Packers, spent last season with the Houston Texans. Now, before we get too excited about this addition here, Amari Rodgers is the player who has had 8 fumbles and like 25 career touches in the NFL. Most of those fumbles did come on kick return or punt return duties. So for some people saying like, oh, cool, Dallas Flowers can play corner because Rodgers can return. No, I do not want him returning kicks. Absolutely not. The corresponding roster move they did was to waive Johnny King. And they also tried out a trio of veteran running backs yesterday. Divine Ozigbo, which Draft Twitter, we adore that name right there. One of our favorites. We stand forever and ever. Running back Kenyon Drake of Alabama, and I think he played for Miami for a while in the NFL. And then Benny Snell, former Pittsburgh Steelers running back. So a lot of veterans that have had a lot of carries in the NFL. Mike Chappell, legend here on the Colts beat, did kind of say that he expects the Colts to make a signing at running back going forward. I don't know when that's going to be or if it's going to be one of these 3 guys, but he said to expect another running back to be brought in. In injury news for today's practice, defensive tackle DeForest Buckner left practice early with a foot injury, or as our guy Shane Steichen likes to say, just a little foot, just a little foot. That's all. He has a foot. And then in positive injury news, Darius Rush, rookie cornerback, he did return to practice from his shoulder injury. So Jake, now they got all the news and notes out of the way. What did you see from the Colts offense in practice today?
Yep. So it was the second day in a row that Anthony Richardson took all of the first team reps. And that was noteworthy because, he's had plenty of days where he's taken first team reps. He was the first guy taking first team reps, but it's the first time 2 days in a row, even go back to OTAs and all that he's taken all of them. So it was like, what does that mean? So I asked Coach Steichen after practice, and he said it was basically just to catch him up and get him extra reps since he missed Monday with that nasal procedure. So unfortunately, not much to read into that yet because, I kind of phrased it, is this the new plan? Should we expect this going forward or whatever? And it's like, no, I think they'll probably continue to rotate. So probably nothing to it. We'll see. Because earlier in camp, he did say we'll start to notice what they're doing with that. So nothing right home there. So statistically, AR was a little better today than he was Tuesday or whenever last practice was. Thank you, Tuesday. But overall, their performance was pretty similar. There were some issues with timing, throwing behind guys or just like throwing too late in the route. Like his inaccuracy in the red zone was something we noted a couple days ago. In detail, so when you're throwing in the back corner of the end zone, that's a play that has to have a lot of touch on it. You can't just like loft a high laser back there because it's almost never going to get caught. And he did that today with Alec Pierce. And it just looked like the result of being too late in Pierce's route. He was already too far over. So that's just kind of the stuff he has to iron out right now. To me, as an observer who is not a coach, I would say his biggest issues right now really are just that timing and anticipation with those routes, but also he probably holds on to the ball a little too long right now.
Yeah.
Early in camp, he was I'm not going to say frantic, but he was like pretty quick doing things. It looked like he was maybe jittery. But now that's almost slowed down. I'm not going to say too much, but it's noticeable that he needs to get the ball out a little quicker. So those are some things they'll iron out. Again, it was another day of people after practice heaping praise on his preparation and ability to correct his mistakes and want to learn from what he's doing wrong. Quentin Nelson talked very highly of him. Coach Steichen, of course. So that's stuff that he'll try and get ironed out. I will say a positive thing about that is he tends to get better as practice goes on. Yeah. So he can kind of fix things on the fly because they did a 2-minute drill at the end of practice. And not only did he get a little better, but he was leading guys, but throwing rockets to lead guys. He hit Michael Pittman a couple times in that 2-minute drill where there was no way that the cornerback could have got that because he led him really well on a slant route. And again, with the velocity that no one else on the roster has the ability to make. So that was good. I will say it was a little better of a day for Richardson. In his defense, I called it a shaky day the other day. Not the greatest day today, but a little better. There was some rookies who had a couple impressive plays. Josh Downs had a really kind of Julian Edelman-esque reception, from the Super Bowl against the Falcons. Him and the defender were kind of colliding, and the ball was just bobbling around in the air. And as Downs fell to the ground, he came over with the ball somehow. I don't know how he did it. It seemed pretty improbable. But Will Mallory is starting to make a really good impression as well. He's another guy stacking those days. Spent the first week on PUP, but came back like he was never hurt. He had a nice one-handed catch from Gardner Minshew during 11-on-11s right in front. I think it was Chris Lammons. And I think it caught Lammons off guard because he kind of froze, which allowed Mallory to turn upfield and gain some more yards. So the rookies had an encouraging day, I would say.
I have no clue how they're going to stack this tight end position. I really have no clue because, again, we've been pretty adamant on this podcast here that Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson are for sure the top two guys. But, I mean, you got three guys right after that, though, that it's man, it's tough. Because you have the rookie and Will Mallory, who's stacking really impressive days since he's come back. Then you have Drew Ogletree, who's running with the first team at times and doing some good things. And then Mo Alley-Cox, the veteran that always will get his chances and stuff like that. It'll be really interesting to see if they keep four even. And if they do keep four, who are those other two guys? Before we move out of the offense, though, Jake, we have to go to the stinkometer. The stinkometer when it comes to the offensive line. What did you see from the offensive line today? Did you see any major issues or still pretty decent from the offensive line?
Not really. I didn't count very many sacks altogether from all units today. There was one group sack, I think, against Minshew with the second unit. But one thing, so Quentin Nelson was asked after practice, how do you guys gauge your effectiveness on the offensive line in a setting like this where it's hard to judge because it's not full contact? And he said, we are going live. On the lines, we are full go. We're doing what we can. So are they. So he said basically how he judges it is what they're doing in the run game. Are running backs getting to the second level, or are they not getting touched until 5 yards away? That's how they're judging it. How effective is the run game? And really throughout camp, there have been some big holes. Sure, there's any other, there's plays where, tackled behind the line of scrimmage or right at the line, but there's been plenty of big plays as well. So far the line is looking pretty decent. They're not noticeably letting guys get killed like we've seen, in especially last year was pretty bad.
Yeah, and no real changes to the rotation or the lineup so far. Especially when it comes to first team, it's been the same five guys. First
team is going to be those five until something happens. there weren't really many shakeups. Danny Penner kicked over to right guard with the second unit. I think he got some reps with the third as well, so that Wesley French could play center. This might be cross-training for them for Penter. Get him some more reps at right guard in a setting that won't kill the team. And then so Jordan Murray had been the third team right tackle. Dan Skipper, who they just signed, he was there today. I've got to expect him probably to kick up to the second unit at some point pretty soon, wouldn't you think?
Maybe. I will say, though, I've never seen pass block grades so low when I looked at his Pro Football Focus from last year, though.
Great.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Is it because he's so tall that every defensive end can get under his reach, or?
All I know is I've never seen multiple games with a 0.0 pass blocking grade before from a player. Like, wow. If you guys want to see something fun, go look at that. But coming up, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about the Colts defense and how they kind of won the day today. Now, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. Go to LinkedIn Jobs, add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your jobs for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And every dayers, we're going to be back tomorrow talking Colts training camp. Now, they don't have practice tomorrow, but we will continue this conversation. We might open the floor up to some more questions overall, and we'll probably have a gut check with Jake here to talk about some guys who have been winning training camp so far and some guys who have not necessarily been helping themselves at all. So make sure you're back here tomorrow, same time, around 4:30. We're going to talk more Colts training camp. All right, Jake, so diving into the defense today, and obviously there's a lot of guys we can talk about here, but again, I think everyone here is kind of becoming a big fan of Darrell Baker Jr. Like, this is a player coming into training camp, like you said, when we talked about him earlier in the week, where cornerback 7, cornerback 8, maybe cornerback 9, a player that's just not on anybody's radar. I was actually trying to look back at his preseason game from last year with the Cardinals. I don't think he had a single defensive snap in the preseason with the Cardinals. Like, he did some special team things for them, but no defensive snaps for the Cardinals. That's how low they viewed him. They cut him after the preseason. Colts brought him to the practice squad, and he's been with the Colts since then. Now he's cornerback 1 or 2 in training camp for the Colts, and he's doing some great things. Like, I think this is such a fun story to follow, and this is why we love training camp, because Darrell Baker Jr. is such a big training camp story for the Colts.
Yeah, I think we're only a week and change into it, but we're about dang near halfway through camp now, and he's got to be the underdog darling so far. And it seems legit. I mean, he's not just like a guy who's showing out with the third or second team and consistently making plays. Like, he's doing it against Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce. Like, he's doing it big time. And I don't know that there's been a bigger winner of training camp than him, because he was given the opportunity, because Juju Brents has yet to practice. Darius Rush has missed the last couple practices. This guy is fully taken advantage. Had an interception today. Is the first interception that's been made by a defensive back so far in camp during 11-on-11s. Now, it was more about the throw from Richardson than it was the coverage, but he was right there and converted the interception. He did his job. So no, he's doing a great job. Gus Bradley speaks really highly of him. Ron Milas speaks very highly of him. So if we're talking roster locks, I can't say a lock, because you and I talked off air, like, it's a log jam of cornerbacks right now who have a strong case. But he seems very, very likely to make the roster at this point. I don't know if he's this year's Brandon Faison, which probably is the case. I mean that in terms of, like, being cornerback 4. Like, all right,
but like,
we need a handful of snaps. I'm not talking about performance. Performance-wise, maybe he'll be better, but in terms of playing time, I think he's probably this year's Faison.
Yeah.
But no, this guy has done himself nothing but favors.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting because again, if you look at his profile, you're like, all right, like this is not just a preseason guy that you don't think can do anything in the game. I mean, this is 6'1" cornerback, nearly 200 pounds, 32-inch arms, which is the super long arms that you want in this type of system. And then he jumped like 41.5 inches in the vertical jump, like 136 inches in the broad jump, ran a 4.43. Did some special teams, and stuff like that. Like he's just a really well-rounded prospect coming in. So now that he's finally finding his footing here in the NFL, like it's really fun to watch his development so far. I'm excited to go out there next week and really watch him up close. Now, a big notable thing that happened on the defensive line was DeForest Buckner went down with that foot injury, or a little foot, just a foot. He has a foot, but
2 of them.
Yeah, he has 2 of them. It's crazy. But what was the defensive line rotation looking like when Buckner went down? Who was that next man up out of that 3-tech position?
Yeah, so McTelvin and Jim came in and lined up next to Grover Stewart when Buckner went out. And that's a guy I've talked about a lot so far in my camp notes on here. He's just been really steady both as a run defender and a interior pass rusher. So that's really no surprise. You maybe would have thought Taven Bryan, but they probably don't think Bryan is as well-rounded as a Jim in order to play more regular snaps. So that was pretty impressive. Later, when it was the 2-minute drill and they were kind of going to a pass rush package, Dayo Adangbo kicked inside to tackle, which of course you love to see that. They had a good looking fast bunch of guys out there, but you didn't have Samson Abukum, you don't have Buckner, but it was good to see them continue to rotate Dayo Adangbo around to kind of take advantage of some opportunities there. But I think altogether, even despite Abukum not being out there and Buckner leaving, we're kind of starting to get a sense of what the rotation really is. Consistently, Titus Leo has been out there as the second team Leo. Tyquan Lewis is missing time, of course, on PUP. Abukum is out. But then, Taven Bryan, McTelvin, a Jim inside with of course, I can't think of it right now, with Khalid Kareem as the big end. So I feel pretty confident in who they like most as their second wave of defensive linemen.
Okay. It was Titus Leo that came in, though, in those situations at the very end when Dio switched into defensive tackle. Was it Titus Leo that played with the first team, or who else kind of came in there?
I think he got some reps with the first team, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Titus Leo now making some way. I mean, like you said, like you've been saying, he's not flashing per se, but they like him enough to get him these valuable reps.
He's a speed rusher guy. It makes sense to get fast guys who can get upfield.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now you do have a note here that says AQM's new role. I'm terrified to hear what that is. Like,
I'm proud of the Colts. No, so I'm proud of the Colts for this one. So Al-Quadin Muhammad was never a bad player when he was here. He was a good player for the role he probably should have had, which was supporting cast on the defensive line and a quality, run defender who could provide some pass rush. But he was eating away snaps from younger guys who needed those developmental snaps. Mm-hmm. That was everyone's big gripe. So the Colts, let's just say if this was Matt Eberflus out there, this would not be the case. AQM has been going like exclusively with the second and third team. Titus Leo is not having his snaps taken away from him, which is great. We're seeing Khalid Kareem out there, which is great because it's like you signed this guy, twice as a restricted free agent. Again, you want to see what he's doing. AQM is just eating some of these second and third teamers up, but we are not seeing it at the expense of younger guys who we want to see those developmental roles. And I'm dead serious. I know, you think that's hilarious.
You put a whole note in our outline.
Yes.
This is say Al-Quadin Muhammad is playing with the third team.
Well, that he's not taking away developmental snaps from guys. That's so important. And I knew you would want to hear that. See, it's bringing you much joy.
That's so funny. I thought that they were having him as like a stand-up rusher or
No,
running
no,
back
no.
at linebacker.
No.
No, it's the guy they signed to a minimum contract like 2 weeks ago is actually playing with the third and fourth teams.
But if this was Matt Eberflus, he would have been in for Ibukum immediately.
Oh my gosh, this comment here is so funny. He's the Udonis Haslam of the team. I can't believe you put a whole note in there that he's playing with the third team. That's the kind of training camp coverage you get from us guys. Now coming up, we're going to throw it over to some of your guys' questions and really dive into what you guys want to hear about this training camp so far. This show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. August is here, and you know what that means. The official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out best ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft. No waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up for the promo code Locked On to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. All right, let's go to some questions here. Some non-Al-Quadin Muhammad questions. That's so good. I needed that today, Jake. It was a long day.
Good.
Let's go with a quick one about your hat, Jake. Someone want to ask what kind of brand your hat is. We'll just answer this really quick.
Yes, I mean, if they want to throw me free hats for this, sure. But this is from Branded Bills.
There you go.
Let's see. They have not just Indiana. They got a bunch of different states out there, but they're pretty cool. I like them. I have 2 different hats of this. Actually,
there we go.
I think I have 3 now that you mention it.
Perfect. Techno Gamer 16. How has EJ Speed been looking? Is he primed for that huge breakout or just a regular breakout? Which I love the positivity there. I will preface by seeing EJ Speed has been out the last 2 practices with a little injury. But Jake, how was he looking before he went down with that injury?
Yeah, no, he's been generally fine. Him and Zaire Franklin together is as thunderous of a run defending tandem as you can imagine. There were a couple times where Speed was there to lead the charge against runs on the outside off tackle, and so I can't make any judgments based off pass defense so far because that was kind of the big question we had about him. But as far as run defending, business as usual for him, which is really positive.
Yeah. Adam asked, how has Blake Freeland and Emile Kior been doing so far in camp? Any chance they crack the starting lineup this season? I would say so far from everything Jake's been saying, as of right now, I wouldn't say they have great chances of cracking that starting lineup because it's been pretty much the top 5. But how the 2 rookies looked so far, Jake?
Yeah, that starting 5 is going to stay the starting 5 unless like disaster happens, someone gets hurt, or they're just performing terribly, which I don't really anticipate. So what a role I could see for Freeland is the extra lineman, the big tight end. Now it's probably going to be mostly Danny Pinter when the season starts as that 6th lineman. We'll see, but I could see Freeland getting some snaps out there. The Colts tend to do that with young offensive linemen that they really like because you can't really disrupt the starting 5 throughout a game. Even though we've seen the Colts do that inexplicably sometimes. So the way they get those guys snaps is by being the extra blocker. I could see that with Freeland. Ekior has also missed the last 2 practices. I don't think we have a designation for whatever his injury is. But the last practice he participated in, he got kicked up to 2nd team right guard from 3rd team. So the Colts, he must be doing something that they're liking. There's not much I can really say about his performance because I mean he was the 3rd team right guard for the most part. That group doesn't get a ton of reps, and I don't know that he had any one-on-one reps against defensive linemen yet. But he's apparently doing stuff that the team liked at least.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we're going to project what they're going to be doing for the regular season, Blake Freeland appears to be that next man up at tackle, whether right tackle or left tackle. If one goes down, he'll be that swing guy. And then it looks like Akior is going to be battling out with guys like Wesley French, Carter O'Donnell,
Right.
Danny Pinter kind of, but Danny Pinter's probably good. But he's going to be battling out with those guys for that very last spot on the roster. So we'll see what happens with those guys there. Adam asked another question here. If Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed can hold down the linebacker positions, could we see Shaq Leonard as a rush end on passing downs? I will say this, as someone who has watched every single snap of Shaquille Leonard's NFL career, I love him as a blitzer. I don't think he can beat tackles one-on-one.
That's the thing. Yeah. Being a guy who has to have a pass rush plan is different than being a blitzer. Yeah. But EJ Speed actually was an edge defender. He played edge defender quite a bit in college at Tarleton State, both as a stand-up rusher and with his hand in the dirt. So it would most likely be Speed.
Yeah, well, he's an auto. Like he can come in and be that auto position, which is to not go on a long spiel here. When you have that 3-4, that 4-3 hybrid defense, which teams run now, when you're in those like 3-4-ish looks or whatever, you're going to have EJ Speed on the line of scrimmage. So EJ Speed as that auto and base defensive sets, which are like 20% of the time now in the NFL, right. Not that much. But in those kind of base sets, if they go for like an under look, then he'll come up on the defensive line and take on like a tight end at the point of attack. So it'd be more like EJ Speed being off the edge. I don't think we'll see Shaq Leonard as a passing down speed rusher, especially because I just don't think he's more qualified to beat an offensive tackle than guys like Dio or Kwity Paye or Samson Ebukam and stuff like that. So I love the thought, though. It seems, I mean, that's what Madden does. They put him at defensive end and have him as a speed rusher. Alex asked a real good question that I wanted to ask you too, is how have the safeties been looking so far? Because with all the hype we're getting of Darrell Baker Jr. and linebackers and defensive linemen, I feel like we've barely talked safety so far in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it plainly, the safeties just haven't really been tested much. Like, they're there, they're doing a solid job, but there haven't really been a lot of like downfield shots for them to break up. Whenever the quarterbacks are going downfield, it's usually when the receiver is on an island with the corner, and there's no safety help back there. So far it's going okay. I know that Nick Cross got some kudos from his teammates a couple times today. You hear Julian Blackman shouting for him, positive things a lot of the time because Blackman is super animated on the sideline. Like, that guy wants to be out there badly. He's probably the loudest guy on the field without being on the field. Like, he's on the sideline screaming for him. But no, I mean, Nick Cross has had really good things said about him from Gus Bradley. He even yesterday, I think he mentioned that they want Eric Johnson to basically do the same things Nick Cross has done to take his game to the next level and in terms of like preparation and effectiveness and things. So Nick Cross, the team likes what he's doing. He's putting himself in the right spots. I can't remember if I mentioned it on here recently, but I asked Shane Steichen about that from an offensive perspective. What are you seeing in Nick Cross? He said he's in the right spots a lot of the time now. And his preparation is equal in walkthroughs as it is practices and then, the meeting rooms and things like that. So there haven't been a ton of opportunities for these guys to make physical plays on the field, but everyone has pretty good things to say about Cross so far.
That's good. That's good. We'll do two really quick ones here. Boro Ben asked what's wrong with Jelani Woods. Saw him on the sideline today. He is out with a hamstring injury or a little hamstring, as we like to say here. Also, Leonard hasn't been practicing with the first team defense yet. That's mostly because they're ramping up his contact. They're not trying to get him out there in full contact yet. This last one is directed right at you, Jake. I swear I didn't ask this one, but we were talking right before the podcast. Yep. How has Adetomi been looking so far? We were actually just talking about this, so I'll give you the floor for the next minute and a half here, Jake, to answer this one.
Yeah, so far it's been pretty nondescript for him. He's just kind of out there. And, as you have mentioned, defensive tackle is kind of a tough gig to break into and be effective right away. Very athletic guy, with a positive frame for the position. You can do a lot of things with him. But so far, just haven't really seen much from him. Again, a week into training camp, so it's whatever. I can't really say much about it. What do you think about? Because I know you have opinions on defensive tackles acclimating to the league.
Yeah, I feel like we'll talk more about this tomorrow when we have more freedom to kind of talk about training camp overall.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Adetomi, like I think a big thing with defensive tackles in acclimating is you're asked to do so much early on. You have to be strong into the run. You have to be able to two gap, especially if you're on the interior and stuff like that. Be able to hold up against double teams while also working on your hands, working on creating two-way goes on the interior against offensive linemen that are jumping you with a lot more efficiency and a lot more effectiveness that you just really don't see at the college level. So you see guys like Grover Stewart. It took him 2.5 years to really become Grover Stewart. You even look at a guy like Taven Bryan on the roster right now. His first year in Jacksonville was terrible. Like it was awful. And then by the time that he got to his final season with the Jaguars and he's kind of been where he is now, like I'm not saying he lived up to his first round potential, but he's been a solid rotational guy and actually looks like a playable asset, unlike that first year in Jacksonville. So it takes these guys a while. We saw it with Tyquan Lewis a little bit too when he was kind of in the same role. Dio obviously was coming off of injuries, so you could see it a little bit with him. But these big three-tech type guys that are super explosive but didn't really have to work their hands much in college because they're so powerful and explosive, it takes them a good amount of time. So first week through practice, I'm kind of treating him like an Anthony Richardson right now, where it's like, look, we're going to see some growing pains. Let's just see what we can do with him. They invested a decent amount of capital in him, fourth round pick in Tommy there. So like, yeah, I think he'll be fine long-term, but it's going to take a minute there. But everydayers, that's all we have for today's show. Again, tomorrow we're going to talk winners and losers of camp so far and also open the floor to some even more questions. So join us at 4:30 tomorrow for more Colts training camp talk. And if you guys don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on the lovable place that is X. Also subscribe to Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys tomorrow afternoon.